Back before Champions released, there was a lot of speculation about which Pokemon would have which abilities, which Pokemon would be good. And when Champions released, we didn't get all the Megas, unfortunately. They're not all at home, they're not all in Champions, obviously. So we don't know a lot of the Mega abilities still. But we do know some of them, and interestingly, amongst those, we have some Pokemon that were supposed to be good that turned out to not be very good, and we have some Pokemon that were supposed to be very bad, and we're sort of getting clowned on before they released, and they've actually turned out to be very good. So I think in today's video what I want to do is talk about the Megas that have yet to be released, and some of the ones I'm concerned about, but how they could be redeemed, right? Because obviously, it's easy to ruin a Mega by giving it a bad ability, but certain ones previously released turn out to be way better than expected. Certain ones turned out to be about what they expected, and then certain ones a lot worse. For example, just so we can get on the same page, we're talking something like Mega Glamora or Mega Scovillain. Mega Scovillain, nobody took that Pokemon seriously until it got a busted ability. Scovillain Mega is one of those Pokemon that's sort of like Darkspun, where Darkspun has this crazy ability that gives a +2 defense when hit by a Fire-type move and Fire-type immunity. And it's not a broken ability because it's on Darkspun, which is not a very good Pokemon. In fact, it's a very bad Pokemon. But if you put that on so many other Pokemon, suddenly they become unstoppable juggernauts. Similarly, a Pokemon like Scovillain, even when it's Mega'd, isn't really that great. That was the reason why nobody took it seriously before the abilities were known. Because Scovillain has 75 speed, which is neither fast enough to be normally viable, nor slow enough to be good in Trick Room. And it has very bad HP with bad defenses. So it didn't look like when we had the ZA only, that Mega Scovillain would ever be a defensive Pokemon. It made sense that it would be an offensive Pokemon. And previously as well, Scovillain had been known as a Chlorophyll Sweeper. So people were thinking, okay, this would be a Chlorophyll Sweeper of some sort. But why would I ever use it when it doesn't have speed to justify having Mega Scovillain versus normal Scovillain? I could rather just run a Life Orb and run normal Scovillain. But people were surprised when Scovillain was turned into a defensive Pokemon purely by the merit of its ability, which punishes any Pokemon, physical or special attacking, whenever they hit it with a burn, which is really valuable. And actually, that defensive utility makes Mega Scovillain a defensive Pokemon that can play an offensive role, that isn't passive, and that's actually really clever design by Game Freak, because they subverted the expectations of the fans and took something that was supposed to be bad on paper and then turned it good. They also took Mega Glamora, which was technically slightly better than normal Glamora because of the speed, but also way worse because it couldn't run Meteor Beam because it didn't have the Power Herb. And so people were like, oh, I'm never going to use Mega Glamora. And they actually made it technically viable to use because they gave it adaptability. One of the best abilities in the game, just for raw damage output. And so, hey, I don't need the 1.5 to my special attack for Meteor Beam if you're just going to give me adaptability, which is a 1.5 boost to all my attacks. I just have that Meteor Beam boost on tap all the time now. On the other hand, they did some other Megas and did basically what we expected. Something like Crabominable got Iron Fist, Mega Trimecho got Levitate. Neither of those abilities were inspiring, and neither of them have particularly served those Pokemon well. Mega Crabominable does have Mach Punch, which is cool for Trick Room teams, because now you can run Drain Punch, Mach Punch, or whatever. And Mega Trimecho does have limited usage on cheesy BSS teams with stored power sets, but the Levitate doesn't really help it out there more than many other abilities might help it. So I would say those two abilities, for example, were ones we expected, but weren't really ones that did justice to that mega evolution. Then there were also megas that turned out, I think, worse than they could have otherwise. Something, for example, like Mega Golurk, who got Unseen Fist. Unseen Fist, prior to Champions, was this busted ability that completely invalidated half of the metagame of VGC just by merit of being able to do full damage through Protect. Unseen Fist now has been nerfed just in time for Mega Golurk to get it. So instead of getting this stupidly broken ability, now you get the ability to do chip damage to something that's protecting. And while that does invalidate Protect at 1 HP after a Focus Sash to stall out a turn of Trick Room, and that's cool, it also means that if I protect my Archaludon as you go for Earthquake, you're going to do like 15% to my Archaludon and give me a defense boost. So all in all, I say that ability comes out in the wash, and I would prefer to have something that gives you a power boost more so than anything else. Another one that I think got done dirty is Mega Hawlucha. Mega Hawlucha is no guard, which is great if you need to use Stone Edge. But outside of that use case, the only time anybody ever uses Mega Hawlucha in singles or doubles is when they use the Entrainment Cheese strat. And while I do find that cheese strat really annoying, because it's been refined and you have the strats with the Snorlax and the stockpile and whatever, for the most part, that's just cheese, and anybody who knows how to play around it can identify it immediately and then just play around it, right? So you don't want to have to be relegated to being a cheese Pokemon. You want to have actual legitimate utility or threat status, and Hawlucha doesn't have that because No Guard doesn't really apply to its moveset. Now if it did have Dynamic Punch, it could at least spam that, but really it doesn't have anything that benefits from No Guard in any meaningful fashion. So Mega Hawlucha is actually a bust of a Mega, in my opinion. Something like Mega Meowstic, I like Trace as an ability. I'm a huge Gardevoir fan, obviously, so why would I not like Trace? I think it's super fun to be able to take Barrascu to Swift Swim and then be just as fast as it with a Choice Scarf. Obviously Mega Meowstic can't do that, but you can't beat Alakazam, which is the main problem. If Alakazam wants to, it can be just as much BST in every single stat as Meowstic and have more left over. So you've just created a worse Alakazam, and the only thing you have, I think, is Moonblast and Fake Out, and that's it. So this is another bust of a Pokemon, because even though it does give Meowstic itself some kind of utility in being stronger, and I do like that because I've liked Meowstic as a Pokemon. It's a fun Pokemon. I like Meowstic. We'll use it in lower tiers, it'll be great. But in higher tiers, it's not going to be able to do too much. But if they had given it Psychic Terrain, then it would have had a legitimate use case, legitimate value, and people would have used it properly. People have varying opinions on something like Mega Skarmory, for example, as well. But I think that the ones that I think got most ruined would be Mega Hawlucha. I think the Mega Golurk, too, could have been better. Everybody, of course, complains about Mega Emboar as well. And frankly, I think Mega Feraligatr also could have had a way better ability than what it got. So those are some examples. Oh yeah, and Mega Chandelure. Mega Chandelure. Can we talk about that one? You gave it Infiltrator, which is an ability it already had. I think it should have had Magic Guard, for sure, because it's going to get completely destroyed by Stealth Rock. If you didn't want to give it Magic Guard, you could have given it something else. But Infiltrator is like one of the most useless abilities. It rarely comes up. And so basically you're not going to have any ability. It's got this crazy high special attack stat, but it's not really got anything else to do with it. And so I think it could be good in like Ario or something in singles. And in VGC, it is too fast for Trick Room, obviously, with base 90 speed. Which is funny because a lot of times what people want to do with Chandelure is run it on Trick Room, or at least have Trick Room plus Imprison, right? But because it's a fast Imprison. But you can't really run alongside Trick Room when you're this much faster. It feels awkward. It's a waste of a Mega slot if that's what you're trying to do with Imprison, right? And outside of that, I don't really see it being used under like Tailwind, for example. So I want to talk about 10 Megas that I am worried about going into the next wave of champions, whenever that may be. And some of the abilities I think that could actually take these Pokemon and turn them into something good people would want to use. Similar to how Mega Scovillain and Mega Glimmer were redeemed from what fans initially expected them to be, which is bad. So first up on my list is Mega Barbaracle. Now Mega Barbaracle obviously has a pretty good stat distribution, especially when you consider that it's a Shell Smash sweeper. It is 88 speed, totally serviceable. I think that does make it the fastest Shell Smash sweeper. Maybe there's one that's faster, but it's going to be up there. It's not Caracosta. And it's got base 140 attack, which is immense. So I do think that Barbaracle has a lot of good things going for it, which is why it's at the bottom of the list. But the one thing I will say about Shell Smash sweepers is that generally speaking, people look in the calc first and they say, oh, look at these crazy calcs. At +2 is 2-hit KO and Corviknight. At +2, it's 2-shotting Hippowdon. And it's destroying this Pokemon or that Pokemon. What can defensively stop it? And maybe defensively it would be hard to stop it. You know, even Umbreon, because it's a fighting type now, can't just come in, tank a hit, and foul play it to death. So we have to worry about that a bit. But then when it comes to actual use, when you look at the thse pet mod, where they give it Tough Claws, right? That boosts up at close combat, and it's going to be really strong. It never really gets used. Why? Well, there's a main reason why, and it's the same reason almost all Shell Smash sweepers are relegated to NU or PU or below. And that's because it's almost impossible to get them set up in the first place. So Mega Barbaracle is going to have to come in, it's going to have to take any entry hazards, it's going to have to take Sticky Web if it's up, and then it's going to have to try to get a Shell Smash off. If my opponent hasn't done a poor job positioning, then they will be in with a Pokemon that's going to punish the setup, either by OHKOing me off rip, or threatening the OHKO at least, or by doing enough damage that it can put me in range of priority in the following turn. Maybe they're even a Dragon type with Skill Shot or something, they can boost up, and I am only 88 speed, right? If this is something that is already reasonably faster than I am, or maybe it's already at +1, and then it has another Skill Shot, like for example Kyurem. Kyurem's already gone for one Skill Shot, now it goes for another one. Now it's going to be faster than me, even if I Shell Smash. So then now I'm prevented from Shell Smashing, I just have to KO the Kyurem in front of me. But I've taken all this damage now. Where am I getting the opportunity to set up? And the biggest difficulty for any Shell Smash sweeper is the opportunity to set up. Something like Dreadnought has Strong Jaw, really good attack stat, reasonably fast for a Shell Smash sweeper, but it never gets the opportunity to set up. And another problem that Barbaracle is going to have, compared to almost all other Shell Smash sweepers, is that it doesn't get to run White Herb. Obviously Mega Blastoise is a Shell Smash Mega, and it's fantastic. So it's not the end of the world. And Mega Blastoise is the exception to the rule, right? Barely any other Shell Smash sweepers are viable in higher tiers of play or in VGC. You never see, for example, Torterra in VGC, even though it was available this entire past generation. Where were the Torterra enjoyers? Where were any of the Shell Smashers? They don't exist. Why? Because you don't get the opportunity to set up the Shell Smash initially. And the same is true of Barbaracle. So what ability do I want to give Barbaracle? I want to give it an ability that will help it to do that setup. One that comes to mind immediately would be Multi-Scale. Technically, you could give it some kind of renamed Terra Shell, which would be an upgrade. But either way, it's just something that says, hey, I get basically one free hit, and I get to set up. You could also give it Dazzling or some other kind of priority blocking ability. I think that would actually be the more powerful of those two. The reason for this is pretty obvious if you played VGC. VGC has been dominated by Farigiraf because it has Armor Tail. It means you cannot fake me out, you cannot Sucker Punch me, you cannot do any of those normal things. It's mostly those two, King Gambit, Sneasler, stuff like that. You can't do any of that stuff on my side. So you can't even dual wing beat me or prankster encore me. These kinds of things all get blocked. So if you had a Mega Barbarical on the opposing on my team, I could have Dazzling, and all of a sudden, not only do I threaten really strong close combats or liquidations or stone edges or rock slides, I guess, because but I would also block priority moves, so I would be a more offensive option for teams that didn't necessarily need Trick Room. Then, of course, in singles, when I do set up a Shell Smash, then you can't hit me with those priority moves. And this is the other thing that I wanted to talk about with Mega Barbarical, is the typing change. Now, the typing change from Rock Water to Rock Fighting seems like a positive one off rip, because now instead of using Liquidation, you get Close Combat. Presumably, if it was Tough Claws boosted, that would be even more powerful, because you get that Tough Claws Close Combat. Of course, if we're using Dazzling, you don't get the Tough Claws. That's besides the point. The point is, it seems like an upgrade. Liquidation is weak, Close Combat is strong. So I get a better and more widely usable stab. The problem is that Bullet Punch is now super effective against you. Aqua Jet and Water Shuriken are now super effective against you. So you lose a lot of your resistances that you previously had to some very common priority moves. Of course, you're not going to be weak to Thunderclap anymore, and you will resist Sucker Punch. So you could argue that it comes out in the wash. But I just remember a lot of times in the ZA Petmon metagame, there were a lot of times where you wish you were neutral to Water Shuriken from Greninja, or you didn't have to worry about Bullet Punch from Scizor. So having the Dazzling ability would mean that you didn't have to worry about those things. So personally, that's the ability I would like to see it have. Next up on the list is Mega Dragalge. Mega Dragalge has Regenerator in the pet mod, and that is probably the ability that would make it the most good. Why is this? Because even though it only has base 65 HP, and that is a pretty bad thing to have, it does have 163 special defense. So you can make this guy live so many special hits. It's great. But it has no recovery. So because you have no recovery, that means that over the course of a battle, you're going to get whittled down really easily. Now, if we look at Mega Dragalge's stats, it does have 44 base speed and 132 special attack. So in a lot of ways, you look at that, you could say, oh, this would make a fantastic Trick Room sweeper. And I would say it would do okay in Trick Room, but Trick Room in singles is bad, and Trick Room in doubles is a crowded field, especially when you talk about megas, right? You want to run this, or Camerupt, or Abominable, or Golurk. There's a lot of megas and non-megas that have really great uses on Trick Room. And so this would just be another one in a very crowded field. I don't think it's a plan for success to just relegate yourself to being a Trick Room attacker. And that goes doubly so when, first of all, your strongest move drops your special attack by 2 stages. So you're going to have to switch out, and it's not spammable. And 2, you don't have any Nasty Plot. Now, I guess if you gave Mega Dragalge Contrary, then in Trick Room, you could spam Trick Room Meteor, get +2 special attack, and be able to spam it. That'd be great. And because you're a poison type, it would be really scary for fairies to switch in. So I guess Contrary could work. But I think Regenerator would be more interesting. Now, currently, there are no Regenerator Mega Pokemon. People wish that Audino had Regenerator, but there are no Regenerator Megas. So I do think this is a good opportunity for a Mega to get Regenerator. if it does not get Regenerator, then another option would be to just give it Recover. If you give it Dragalge Recover, that I think would actually be better than Regenerator in a lot of ways. Because then, first of all, you would have another ability, including Adaptability, which is what it currently has. And losing Adaptability does mean that Mega Dragalge is a lot weaker than normal Dragalge. So having Adaptability plus Recover would be, frankly, the ideal situation. But if you don't give it Recover, or some kind of actual recovery move, because Life Dew is not really a recovery move, especially not in singles, then I think Regenerator would be the next best option. Because Flip Turn, of course, lets you get out of there and regenerate your health, and then you have your dual stabs, and then whatever the heck you want to last. Next up on the list is Megastaraptor. Megastaraptor is an interesting Pokemon. Traditionally, flying and fighting combined is actually one of the best offensive typings in the entire game. Fighting is a fantastic type, offensive typing. It has a very spammable move in close combat, which Staraptor does get. Flying is another fantastic offensive typing, which very few types resist, and the ones that do resist it are weak to close combat or neutral in the case of electric. So flying and fighting combined actually makes for basically unresistible damage output and often super effective damage output. The only guy that can really do anything about that would be like Aegislash. So the problem is that flying and fighting is a very crowded field. There are 3 Pokemon that have those typings besides Megastaraptor. You have Flamigo, Hawlucha, and Galarian Zapdos. Now, Flamigo, of course, is not a Mega Pokemon, so it doesn't have the BST of a Mega Pokemon. However, that being said, because it's not a Mega Pokemon, it doesn't have to hold an item, and so it can mitigate a lot of that downside of not being a Mega, right? You say, oh, well, Flamigo, I don't have to respect it because it's not very fast. Well, I run a Choice Scarf. Suddenly, Flamigo is the fastest out of all of the Pokemon. If I run a Choice Band, it's really strong, right? Just as strong as Megastaraptor or whatever. So it can make up for that deficiency. Then you have Galarian Zapdos, and Galarian Zapdos is, pretty strong and pretty fast, faster than Flamigo even. And it likewise can run an item. Both Flamigo and Zapdos are not restricted to items and can run whatever item they see fit. So that automatically, for both of those, is a benefit, even if they aren't necessarily technically as strong as Megastaraptor. Then you have normal Hawlucha and Mega Hawlucha. Now, normal Hawlucha has existed for the longest out of all of these Pokemon and has Unburden as an ability, which everybody knows what Hawlucha does. So having that crazy speed stat means that not only can you tech yourself out to be bulkier, because you will get the speed and maybe run Adamant or whatever, but it also means that you can play with your moveset a lot. You can run Encore, Roost, Swords Dance, Dual Stab, Throat Chop, whatever you need depending on the metagame. And you'll still get that speed at the end of the day. So really, Hawlucha is a pretty good Pokemon and is sort of the benchmark for what you have to do in order to be the king of the roost when it comes to the flying and fightings. No pun intended. Now, Mega Hawlucha, as I previously alluded to, I think is actually a downgrade over normal Hawlucha because No Guard is not really that useful of an ability. So functionally, Mega Hawlucha just operates without an ability. And while it may be stronger, it's not faster, and certainly not faster if you consider Unburden. And it takes up a Mega slot. So in singles, there's not really any reason to use Mega Hawlucha. And in doubles, the only reason one would use Mega Hawlucha is if you wanted to run the entrainment cheese. Because if you were using a Hawlucha normally and not using a cheese strat, why wouldn't you just use normal Hawlucha and then run a Mega? Because you could do that too. And then you get the speed of Unburden, which, if Sneasler shows anything, Unburden is a fantastic ability. So maybe, you'd want that instead of having to take up a Mega slot just to be slower. So, getting back to Megastaraptor now, what did Megastaraptor have to do in order to stand out? Really, it doesn't have to do anything. And that's the plot twist here. What ability do I want a Megastaraptor? Anything. Anything will be fine on Megastaraptor. Some people are saying, ooh, it could have Contrary. I think Contrary would be a waste of an ability on Staraptor because the only thing it has for Contrary is close combat. And if you have Brave Bird, you're already trying to KO yourself by losing HP. So getting bulkier doesn't really make any sense to me. I think that something like Tough Claws or even just keeping Reckless or something would probably be better on Megastaraptor. But that's just me. Even something like Contrary or Defiant, which would be basically the same ability as Zapdos, would be fine. You are faster than Zapdos without the Choice Scarf. You are stronger than all these other guys. So you have some key advantages. Actually, Megastaraptor and Mega Hawlucha are pretty similar. Megastaraptor is just a bit bulkier, stronger, and Mega Hawlucha is just a bit bulkier. So because Mega Hawlucha fumbled the bag so hard, Megastaraptor can just come in with any relevant, useful ability, and it will be an upgrade. Megascrafty is a Pokemon that people really don't have a lot of faith in because, oh, it's 4 times weak to fairies. A fairy looks in its general direction and it explodes. And that's true, but Meganium seems to be doing just fine, and it's 4 times weak to poison. You saw all those calcs on Twitter of people talking about how Ghastly one-shots Mega Meganium with Sludge Bomb. And it's like, okay, Captain Obvious. That doesn't matter. How many teams are there that don't have a fairy type? And Play Rough is somewhat used as coverage for some Pokemon, but if a Pokemon can have Play Rough, you'll probably know about it. And outside of that, really, Dazzling Gleam is not that commonly used or even distributed as coverage. So as long as you know what you're working with, you can totally make Mega Scrafty work. And I think Scrafty has one of the most interesting and useful pre-Mega move pool or ability pools in the game. If you want to not have to worry about getting status, you can have Shed Skin. If you want to get a +1 boost before you Mega, you can have Moxie, similar to how Heracross or Pinsir do it. And you can also, of course, use Intimidate. After you Mega Evolve, what ability would be useful? Well, if, for example, you kept Intimidate, you would actually get double Intimidate. So that's cool. If you kept Moxie, I think that would not be a very good option. And Shed Skin is the one the Pet Mod currently has equipped on it. I think that's an okay ability at best, but I actually think we can do a lot better. If we look at Mega Scrafty, it's got really good defenses at 135 apiece, but it only has base 65 HP, so it's not really living as many hits as you might think it would. It has 130 attack, and that's actually where most of the points went on Mega Scrafty, because actually normal Scrafty is pretty weak. And so Mega Scrafty is a huge attack buff. So let me tell you, one ability would turn Mega Scrafty from being a Pokemon that nobody respected into one of the most viable and usable Pokemon in VGC, and actually would be quite useful even in singles. And that is an ability that ignores items of your opponent. So if my opponent has a Colbur Berry, don't care. You don't get to eat it. I knock it off before you get to eat it. If they have a Chople Berry, I knock it off, or I Drain Punch through it before you get to eat it. It also would ignore Covert Cloak, so they don't get to have Fake Out, ignoring the flinching. So Scrafty gets Fake Out. It gets Intimidate before Mega Evolves. I can come in, intimidate you. I can then pressure Fake Out, and you can't even Covert Cloak through it. It would also ignore Rocky Helmet. This kind of ability would be massive for something like Scrafty. And you might say, well, that sounds too broken. Well, look what they did for Mega Skullvillain, right? Mega Skullvillain has an ability that literally burns every Pokemon that does any amount of damage to it. Except for Fire types, I guess. That's pretty good. So having an ability that just says, hey, I don't care about your item, it's just mega scrafty. I thought we weren't scared of this guy, right? It's just a fairy type move. It's so easy. Let's now talk about Mega Malamar. Mega Malamar is a mega that I think most people have sort of given up on because, hey, it already had a pretty bad BST to begin with. And what they did with the stat investments was pretty nonsensical, right? You mostly dumped it into special attack and special defense. And people are like, what the heck are we doing with this? Now, in Legend ZA, they did give Mega Malamar close combat, but as we've seen, they've taken away a lot of moves from Pokemon once they transitioned back into champions. I think Legend ZA is just playing around and seeing, well, maybe we'll give crazy amounts of moves to all these guys, see what that does to the metagame, and then maybe we'll take it away, maybe we won't. I have no clue what they were doing, giving Stealth Rock to Meowstic and stuff like that, right? So giving close combat to Mega Malamar, I wouldn't count on that sticking around, right? If it does, then hey, that would be great, and even greater for Mega Malamar if it doesn't get Contrary. And I don't think it will have Contrary as a Mega. But if you use a pre-Mega, hey, you get a +1, +2 to your defenses, and then you can go on your merry way as Mega. So looking at Mega Malamar, you have to ask yourself, what is this Pokemon supposed to do? It only has 2 stats that are even above what base 100, and that's a Mega Pokemon. And none of them are above base 120, and again, this is a Mega Pokemon. It's one of the worst Mega Pokemon in terms of base stats that there is. So what are we doing with Mega Malamar? What I want to do with Mega Malamar is Speed Boost. Now, Speed Boost doesn't really make sense on Mega Malamar. Just looking at it, yeah, it's sort of skinny. But does it really warrant having Speed Boost? I don't really think so. But I think it would be nice for it. Why? Well, it has base 88 speed. If it gets faster, you can actually do stuff with it. The thing I want you to be able to do with it is actually go for Nasty Plot. I think having a special Malamar as opposed to a physical Malamar would be a differentiating factor between normal Contrary Malamar and Mega Malamar, and would actually give it some kind of use case. You have Dark Pulse, you have Flamethrower, you have Psychic Noise, Ice Shock, all the standard stuff, right? You've got Stored Power even, which is a very interesting one. Because let's say I run Dark Pulse, Stored Power, Close Combat, and then one last move like Rest or something like that, right? Or Nasty Plot actually would be better. Okay, I get 1 or 2 defense boosts before I Mega. I get speed boosts continuously as I Mega, and I have Nasty Plot. So with all of those boosts combined, it would be a pretty nasty Stored Power Sweeper. And if you think about Stored Power Sweepers, they have to worry about Psychic types, and they have to worry about Dark types. Well, Psychic types can't switch in because I have Dark Pulse, and I'm a Dark type. So that's covered. Just Dark types, while both of those, and actually Dark types are generally a Dark and Psychic type's worst nightmare, but I'm still packing that Fighting type coverage. So you still would have to worry about that. It technically has Signal Beam, but they took away Signal Beam inexplicably, so I wouldn't count on that. But you would have the close combat coverage option if you really needed it. If you had Superpower only, and they took away close combat, then that would be sad, but you're still getting 2 boosts for your Stored Power, and if you have that attack boost, even if you drop it by using the Superpower, well, now you're just back to neutral, and so that's not the end of the world. I think the speed boost would make Mega Malamar a very cheesy matchup fishy Pokemon, but that's how most Stored Power Psychic types are. But I think it's basically one of the best options that Malamar has. The other one that I've thought of that maybe would be a little more thematically appropriate, Mega Malamar does get Hypnosis. You could give it something that made its Hypnosis 100% accurate, because, it's so good at using Hypnosis. But other than that, I don't really see Mega Malamar getting to do much. And it really does need a broken ability, Mega Skull Villain style. in order to make it work. Just because, hey, Mega Skull Villain had 2 stats that were above 130 or whatever it had. So having no stats above 120 is dire, and only 2 of your stats are even above base 100. That's a sign of a very bad Mega. It's going to need something drastic in order to make it even remotely viable, much less good. Alright, now we're getting to some of the more interesting ones, I think. Mega Tatsugiri is up next. Mega Tatsugiri is tough because normal Tatsugiri is not that strong, but it's not supposed to be strong. It's supposed to be the brains of the operation in the Dondozo Tatsugiri combo. Of course, in a singles context, that doesn't happen, so they have to operate separately. And Mega Tatsugiri theoretically should be what makes Tatsugiri viable in singles. The problem is, what do you give it? If you give it Storm Drain, which it currently has, that's a nice ability. It does mean you're immune to water, but you 4 times resist water, so it's not very useful. And of course, if it keeps Commander, that introduces all sorts of questions, like, if I have Commander, how do I'm losing my Mega inside of Dondozo and VGC, and in singles I have no ability? That seems wrong. So I severely doubt that Tatsugiri gets Commander. But what I do think will happen, or what I do think could happen, that would be actually sort of interesting, would be a Commander-like ability that is an upgrade to Commander. This is an ability that says you get all the benefits of Commander and it acts just like Commander, but if the Dondozo is KO'd, when you come out, you get a +1 or maybe a +2 to all your stats, similar to how the Dondozo is boosted. So of course, when Commander happens and the Tatsugiri goes inside the Dondozo, then the Dondozo gets +2 to all its stats, an Omni boost at +2. And you can't switch out because the Tatsugiri is inside of you, right? So you have basically what amounts to a no retreat. So I present 1 of 2 options. Either you get a +2 to all of the stats to the Tatsugiri once the Dondozo dies, and the no retreat status is in place. You could even make, you probably should make it that if you're playing doubles, that the Tatsugiri has to stay out by itself. Or something that's a little bit less broken, just a +1 to all of its stats. So it gets +1 to special attack, +1 to SPDF, +1 to speed, all that good stuff once the Dondozo dies. Because a lot of times I feel like Dondozo dies, the Tatsugiri comes out, it doesn't really have too much it can do, it's not very strong, and it just gets on the chopping block right away. It would also be interesting in singles, because what you would do is you would just ask the question, is there a Dondozo on the team that is dead? If so, the first time this Mega Pokemon comes out, it gets the boosts, either +1 or the +2. So this would encourage people to play with Dondozo Tatsugiri in singles, because what you would do is you'd play an early game Dondozo. Dondozo would disrupt your opponent as much as it could and kill itself with Wave Crash or something. And then once it's done that, then when the Tatsugiri comes out and a Mega evolves, then asks the question, is Dondozo in the party? Yes. Is Dondozo dead? Yes. Then I get my boosts. Now this is a one-time boost, similar to Zacian or something like that. So you can't just come in and get the boosts every single time. But, and of course if it was the +2, then you have the no retreat status. But I think that would be interesting. A little bit far-fetched. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's probably not going to get any commander status at all. It's not going to be allowed to go into the Dondozo if it's Mega Evolved. But it'll be sort of interesting. Next up, we got Mega Scolipede. Scolipede is one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, and I really don't like what they did stats-wise to Mega Scolipede. I liked the Mega Evolution fine. I think it looks sort of classy. But I think that its stats are really confusing. So right off the bat, Scolipede only has 60 base HP. So you wouldn't think of this Pokemon as wanting to be very bulky. But then, what they did is they took its reasonably high speed stat and gutted it and put a ton of the Mega Evolve points into defense. So they've taken a Pokemon and completely changed what it is based off of the stat distribution. Now, inherently, that's not a bad thing. Certain Pokemon, when they Mega Evolve, will change what kind of Pokemon they are. Something like Garchomp into Garchomp Z obviously changes from being a physical attacker into a special attacker. Even something like Dragonite, which was a less dramatic example, did change into a special attacker as well. And we've seen other Pokemon with radical shifts to their base stats in order to compensate for stuff, like Mega Diancie losing all of its bulk and turning into a fast special attack, fast mixed attacker, or Mega Beedrill losing all of its defenses and turning into a hyper fast, strong attacker. This has happened on occasion before, but usually it's happened to making them more fast, more powerful. It really doesn't happen where they take it and make it way slower and way bulkier. In fact, I don't think that really has ever happened before. Yes, Pokemon have maybe lost a bit of speed and gotten some bulk. Maybe they've even lost some attack stat, although I don't really know off the top of my head which ones those would be. If they did lose some attack stat, it would be an attack stat they didn't use. But Mega Scolipede lost almost all of its speed. Not enough to be a Trick Room attacker, mind you, but a lot of its speed to put into its defense, despite only having 60 base HP. Now, there are two types of Megas, broadly. There are Megas that take what the Pokemon did previously and make them better at doing that thing. There are also Megas that change what the Pokemon was doing previously. For example, Mega Greninja took Greninja and made it faster and stronger. That's it. It keeps Protean even, right? That makes a lot of sense. Mega Barbaracle, as previously mentioned, is a Shell Smash Sweeper, and it will continue to be a Shell Smash Sweeper. But on the other hand, something like Mega Sableye took Sableye, which was a Prankstermon, and turned it into a Magic Bounce Disruptor. So it changed how it was performing its actions. You took a Pokemon like Mega Starmie, which was a special attacker, and turned it into a really weird mixed attacker, but mostly people using it as a physical attacker. Right? So there are a few Mega Evolutions that have completely changed what this Pokemon is meant to be doing or how it's doing it. As mentioned previously, Mega Diancie, of course, goes from being a slow, bulky Pokemon that usually uses offensive Trick Room into a very fast, speedy, frail Pokemon. So you can do it, but those are broadly the two options. Either you continue doing what you were doing, or you have some kind of shift from being a physical attacker to a special attacker, from being slow to being fast. So this is the first time where you go from being very fast to being very slow. Garchomp, Mega Garchomp is slower than normal Garchomp, obviously, but it was never this bad. Now, let's talk about the former case. If I wanted to make a Mega for Scolipede and keep it doing what it was doing, let's say we make the argument that Mega Scolipede is going to keep Speed Boost, and the reason they lowered its speed was so that they had more points to put in other places. And, well, you'll just get faster in the end anyway, right? Well, if that was the case, then Scolipede does one of two things, normally. Either one, Scolipede is a suicide lead spiker, or two, Scolipede is a Sword Stance sweeper. In the former case, am I trying to make Scolipede be a better suicide spiker by tanking its speed so that it is now way easier to taunt or to rapid spin on? Am I tanking its speed because we want suicide spikers to have lots of defense? Is that normally how those guys go? No. Normally you want suicide mons off the field right as soon as they've finished their job of laying up hazards or screens or whatever. So that doesn't make any sense if you're trying to continue Scolipede doing that job. Let's say that you want Scolipede to be a Sword Stance Sweeper. Then, does it make sense for a Sword Stance Sweeper to want lots of bulk and defense? No, a Sword Stance Sweeper wants to be fast and speedy and strong. Does a Sword Stance Sweeper want to have to spend multiple turns wasting going for protects to get enough speed boosts to be relevantly fast? No, a Sword Stance Sweeper would prefer to already be fast and outspeed almost all Pokemon after one speed boost. That's what you want. So the stat distribution of Mega Scolipede does not enhance either of the two currently used Scolipede modes. Scolipede will need a new mode in which to operate in order to actually be any good. Now, Scolipede has multiple problems. One of them, of course, being that now it does not get to run heavy-duty boots, so it's going to be weak to hazard. But more importantly, it has a huge problem with being walled by poison types, being walled by steel types, and generally struggling into many flying and ground types, including, of course, Gliscor and Landorus. So, yes, technically, you can Sword Stance up and use Aqua Cutter, or not Aqua Cutter, Aqua Tail, and you can use Rock Slide or something like Moltres, and that's really cool. And you have Earthquake or a lot of steel types like Magearna or whatever, but you don't have something that can hit Corviknight and Skarmory and Celesteela, and you don't have something that gives you more than 4 move slots. So have fun trying to run a 0-stab Pokemon just because you need all that coverage just to hit anything. Scolipede can never really break a well-built team because it's always going to have those defensive options, you know? So those are the struggles that Scolipede has, and that really exists in the paradigm that Scolipede is trying to be a setup Sword Stance Sweeper. In the paradigm that you're a Spikes lead, well then, it doesn't really matter. Again, we don't think that Scolipede is going to be a Spikes lead, given that it just lost all of its speed in favor of lots of bulk, which a Spikes lead wants speed and not bulk. If you have Magic Bounce as an anti-taunt measure or something like that, that could be interesting, but first of all, Mega Scolipede doesn't really strike me as a Pokemon that feels Magic Bouncy. Although I suppose you could make the same argument about something like Absol or something. Mega Scolipede could have something like Prankster. That way you have Prankster Spikes, but you don't really have much else to do besides Spikes at that point, especially considering that you'll probably lose Stealth Rock and other moves that you got in Legend ZA. The Scolipede doesn't really have any abilities that would benefit it defensively unless you give it something like Regenerator. If you give it Regenerator, if it gets to keep U-turn from Legend ZA, then it could be a defensive pivot. Something to absorb T-Spikes, tank hits from fighting types and some other Pokemon like that. It would actually be passable at that. It doesn't have very much HP, but it does have a really good defense stat. So you make it defensively tanky, come in, tank a hit or two. Now, as opposed to something like Toxapex, you don't have Scald, so it's going to be a lot harder for you to punish physical attackers, right? You don't have Scald, you don't have Haze, so a lot of stuff's going to set up on you and just boost right through you. But technically, that could be a use case for Scolipede that would be congruent with the stats that they gave it. That's the main question. Whenever you're talking about what are we going to give Mega Scolipede, you have to ask what is congruent with the stats that it was given. And I really don't know. And so for this Pokemon, I say I do not know what they should give Mega Scolipede. But I do know that I want it to be something good because I want Mega Scolipede to be good. And because they've completely nerfed its stats like this, I really don't see what it's supposed to be. But I'm hoping and trusting that similar to something like Mega Scovillain, they will save Mega Scolipede. Let's talk about electric megas for a minute here. We're going to talk about 2 of them in a row. If we talk about what Pokemon that are electric type are megas, just going down the list of viability, we have Mega Zeraora, and Mega Zeraora is going to be very good. Mega Zeraora is faster than all of the Z Megas. Even if it just keeps Volt Absorb or something like that, you can't go wrong with 153 base speed and crazy dual offensive options. Very good Pokemon. No complaints about Mega Zeraora whatsoever. Other than, I suppose, they didn't give it a dual typing. Because if they had done that, then it would have been really good. Now, the rest of the megas. Mega Ampharos is a bad mega. It has Mold Breaker, which, as people have previously talked about with Mega Emboar, is not very useful in most cases. You do get to bypass Volt Absorb, well that's cool. But if I have a ground type, like Gastrodon or something, I can just come in and tank your hits, right? You have Mega Manectric, which is a bad mega. Back in the day, it got by. Why? Because it had hidden power, and I could tailor its hidden power to the tier it was in. But now hidden power is gone, and you can't even terastallize a Mega Pokemon anyway. So, you have no coverage on Mega Manectric other than fire coverage. And while that is not bad, for grass types, for example, it does not change the fact that you're going to have to Flamethrower or Overheat into a ground type every time it comes in, and it will come in basically every time. So, Mega Manectric, bad mega. It has Intimidate, but it's frail. It's fast, but not meaningfully so. And it's reasonably strong, but has no way to break the ground types that are coming in on it. And then we have the 2 Raichu megas. So let's talk about the typings for these guys first and foremost. As I previously alluded to for Mega Zeraora, I wish the Mega Zeraora had a secondary typing. It does not. Mega Ampharos gets a secondary typing. That's cool. Mega Manectric does not get a secondary typing, and neither of the Raichus get a secondary typing. And finally, what other Pokemon is electric type and gets a Mega? Mega Electros. Does Mega Electros get a secondary typing? It does not. So, first of all, there are not that many electric Megas. There are only 5 electric Pokemon that are capable of Mega Evolving. Raichu has 2 Mega Evolutions, so there's 6 Mega Evolved electric Pokemon, but there's only 5 Pokemon that are capable of Mega Evolving that are electric type. That's it. And out of 5 of those Pokemon, only 1 of them gains a dual typing upon Mega Evolution. I really have no idea what Game Freak was thinking when they did that. They said, let's make all of the electric megas stay monotype and have all of the Mega Evolutions be monotype electric. Of course, there are so many electric types that could benefit from a secondary typing, and I think electric might be one of the most monotype typings out there besides like ground and normal. So don't quote me on that, but it feels like there's a lot of mono electric Pokemon out there. Of course, there are fan favorites like Luxray, which everybody wants to get a Mega and for it to be part Dark. We don't have to relitigate that conversation. You could have had other Pokemon that were already electric and something else get a Mega. For example, Mega Vikavolt. You could have totally done that, made it like super fast with speed boost and give people what they actually wanted. Then it would have been Electric Bug Mega. Then you would have had a dual typing there. You could have made Magnezone get a Mega. That would have been dual typing. You could have given Electivire Electric Fighting Mega or something else. You could have even made it Electric Fire and then made Magmortar Fire Electric or something, right? You could have done all sorts of cool things, but instead they took monotype electric Pokemon only and only gave one of them a secondary typing. This is infuriating to me. Electric is one of my favorite typings of all time. It totally vibes with who I am as a person. And yet, they don't give the good Megas. Only good one on the list is Mega Zeraora. And maybe Mega Raichu Y. Just because Mega Raichu Y will be fast. If they do give it something like Electric Terrain or something, then it could be quite scary. But aside from that, there are no good megas. So let's talk about Mega Electros. Mega Electros has sort of a similar situation to Mega Skull Villain. I keep bringing up Mega Skull Villain, but I was really impressed with what Game Freak did with them. Here they have 85, 80, 90, so you have a little more bulk, but you don't really have too much else except for your attack stats. Your attack stats are great, 145, 135. So Mega Electros just went in all in on the bulky mixed attacker concept, which is really cool. It's a bit of a waste in the sense that usually you're going to just want to invest in one or the other. But the fact that you can run one or the other is the benefit you get out of having that mixed attacking stat and losing some of your stat points as a result. Now, Mega Eel could keep Levitate, and if it does keep Levitate, I will not at all be surprised. I will be disappointed. It will keep it as the only Pokemon that takes neutral damage and has no weaknesses, excluding Mold Breaker, obviously, because it will have the electric typing and Levitate, which means you have no weaknesses, but having no weaknesses is not a substitute for having meaningful resistances. Nobody complains about Ferrothorn being 4 times weak to fire and weak to fighting because it has a bevy of meaningful resistances. Electric types do not have meaningful resistances. They resist electric, they do resist flying, which is good, and they resist steel, which is pretty meaningless. That's it. So defensively, you aren't actually very good. So having one more weakness on the top of that isn't really going to change much. One weakness, 3 usually not very useful resistances, big whoop. Every other Pokemon has at least one weakness, so you might as well have one as well. What you want instead is a way to actually leverage your attacking stats. So because Electros did not get a secondary typing, it only has one stab option, which is electric. You can either run physical, in which case you have to run Wild Charge or, Supercell Slam, or you can run special, and then you have to run Thunderbolt or Discharge, right? And I like Thunderbolt and I like Discharge. Those are cool. But as soon as they go into the ground type, that's a problem. Now, physical and special Electros both have their use cases. For example, you do get Coil on Electros, which actually pairs really nicely with Supercell Slam, because then you don't miss. You just have to worry about immunities and ground type. But technically, that is something that's cool. You also have Close Combat or Drain Punch, and you've got Knockoff, and you've got Psychic Fangs, technically. You've got U-Turn, of course. Physical Electros is quite good. You also have Special Electros, which has Giga Drain and Flamethrower, and you've got, of course, whatever electric move you want to have. You've got some good stuff going on the physical or special side. How could we augment this? Well, the main thing Electros has to worry about is immunities, being the ground types and Volt Absorb. Well, Volt Absorb is mostly confined to Electric Rats and Jolteon, or maybe the odd Lantern, so I'm not too worried about that, especially if I'm running a special Electros, because then I have Giga Drain, and they don't really touch me either, so I'm just going to stay in and Giga Drain them. But when it comes to the ground types, I would like to be able to do a little more to those. And of course, something like Gastrodon or Seismitoad does not want to come in on me. But if I'm dealing with a different kind of Pokemon, maybe like a Sandaconda or something, then that could be a little more annoying depending if they are special invested or not. What I would like to see on Electros, and I think it makes a lot of sense thematically, would be a Water Steelworker or Rocky Payload, right? Something that gives Electros a secondary stab option. Instead of it just being a coverage move, I want it to actually do damage. And so Electros does get water coverage. It gets Aqua Tail, it gets Waterfall, and it gets Muddy Water. So both physical and special attackers can use it. There's some really cool stuff you can do with Electros. I think it needs to have a cool stab in order to actually be able to hit hard on more than just one typing. And so I want it to have a water type, Rocky Payload, or Steelworker. Moving on to Mega Raichu X. That's the other Mega. that is electric type that is probably going to languish quite hard. Again, I'm not worried at all about Mega Zeraora, and Mega Raichu Y should be okay just because it is faster and it is quite strong. But with Raichu X, they made it more bulky and they gave it attack. It didn't give it any speed. So in terms of being a Raichu, yes, technically it can leverage its Volt Tackle more, and it can have a stronger Fake Out if it's VGC or something. But the bulk isn't really helping you, and you're not any faster than you were before. So it doesn't really make too much sense. If you're using it for Fake Out support, you'd rather have Raichu Y, because then you actually have something scary, right? You have a nuke alongside your Fake Out, whereas Raichu X doesn't really have that option. Volt Tackle is a reasonably strong move, coming off of base 135 attack, but it's nothing too crazy, and as soon as I go into a ground type, you have to contend with that as well. Depending on the coverage you have, that may or may not be a concern. For example, Raichu does get Grass Knot, it does get Surf. One of those may be valuable in this situation, but that just depends on what you're facing. If, for example, you were facing something like a Grass type, for example, like a Mega Chestnut, for example. Mega Chestnut is going to just chew your Volt Tackle, and it doesn't care about your coverage. Now, technically, you could run Play Rough as well, so that's cool. You'd have to break through it somehow without having really any boosting options on the physical side, but maybe you could do it. It's questionable, right? Mega Raichu Y has Nasty Plot. You don't have any physical boosting moves. What do I want to see out of Mega Raichu X? Well, it's tough. I don't really know how you can elevate it beyond just being a slightly stronger Raichu. But if you were to just ask me right off the top of my head, I would just say Magic Guard. Right? Again, all Mega Pokemon have to deal with hazards. They don't want to have to come in on Spike Stack. It's annoying. And Raichu is one of those Pokemon that wants to be able to Volt Switch out if it's in a bad matchup. Again, like that Chestnut situation, right? You're not going to beat it with Play Rough, and you had to have at least one coverage option of Surf or Grass Knot for the ground types. So you probably don't have room on your moveset to have every single coverage option that you can have. And Play Rough is probably going to be one of the last ones on there. You probably want like Knockoff, Volt Tackle, and then you maybe want Volt Switch or something just to get out of there, plus either Grass Knot or Surf, one of the two. Maybe even Nuzzle if you're really feeling it. That's the kind of sets we're expecting with Mega Raichu X. So, at the very least, if you had Magic Guard, you wouldn't have to worry about the hazards on switching, except for Sticky Love, I guess. Magic Guard's main benefit would be you wouldn't take Rocky Helmet, you wouldn't take poison damage if you ended up getting poisoned, obviously, and Volt Tackle wouldn't kill you. Let's say, for example, that you do get a strong hit off, and you KO one or two Pokemon. That's cool. If they are valuable KOs, then you're good to go. If they were not valuable KOs and you're still dead, then what did you really do? Right? And you have 60 base HP. So you don't have a big HP pool to work with. And you almost certainly do not invest in that HP pool because you are a fast physical attacker. So, similar to something like Mega Skarmory uses that Brave Bird. It KOs the Pokemon and it KOs itself. So then you have no Mega Pokemon anymore. So Mega Raichu, if it had Magic Guard, at least wouldn't kill itself, which I think is valuable. Now, is it going to make Mega Raichu X like this crazy guy you can't switch into? No. You just go into your ground type. And if it's specially defensive enough and has a recovery option, you could probably deal with it. If you have something like a Lantern or something, you just switch into that. It's physically defensive. You get a Wish Passer, you'll be fine. But at the very least, it would mean that Mega Raichu isn't killing itself while it's trying to kill you. Finally, on our list, we have Mega Pyroar. Now, Mega Pyroar, of course, is the Pokemon, I think, out of all of these that needs the most help because it got the least help already. At least with Mega Scolipede, you could respect that Game Freak appears to be trying to do something. Clearly, there was some thought and intent behind that stat distribution, and even if we don't see it now, perhaps they have a plan and perhaps it will turn out. With Mega Pyroar, as far as I can tell, there was no plan. Aside from the design, which I personally dislike a lot, Mega Pyroar Shiny at least looks like it's banana cream pie or something. But Pyroar, stat-wise, is bad. They literally just took 20 and put it in each stat and called it a day. Now, why did they do that? In my personal opinion, I think they wanted to have a member of Team Flare in the game that had Pyroar as their signature Pokemon. And if they had Pyroar as their signature Pokemon, they would need to be able to Mega Evolve it, because all the other main characters in the game can Mega Evolve their ace. So that necessitated having a Mega Pyroar. They didn't really care about this character, and they didn't really care about the Pyroar, so they just sort of threw the stats on and called it a day. I could be wrong, but that is what it seems like to me. Because if you really cared, you would not have given it 20 attack points. You would have put that into speed or special attack or something and tried to do something with this Pokemon. But they said no. I'm going to waste all of the stat points and put them into nothing that matters. That is the situation we are dealing with Mega Pyroar, and I expect the ability to be very much in the same vein. They didn't care about the design. Yes, I know they're doing something cool with the kanji in the main. I do not care. It looks bad. They did not care about the base stats. These stats are atrociously optimized, and I do not think the ability will be good either. Now, we do have that one leak, which may or may not have been debunked by now. I do not know where we stand on that. The leak had some things that appeared to be right, and they had some things that turned out to be wrong. So depending on how much you think that matters, it may or may not still be on the table for discussion, but that leak did say that Mega Pyroar would have an ability that would boost its fire-type moves. Now, there is another Pokemon that boosts its moves in Sun, which is Mega Houndoom. The idea with Mega Pyroar boosting its fire-type moves would be that you could do that in Sun, and then you'd get the Sun boost, and then you'd get the boost to your fire-type moves as well. But Mega Houndoom already does that. It has Solar Power, and in the Sun, the Solar Power, Stab, Fire Blasts, or Overheats, or whatever, are going to cook. If we look at Mega Houndoom, Mega Pyroar is a little bit faster, but Mega Houndoom is way stronger, right? You've got the 115 versus 126, so yes, Mega Pyroar is faster, but you've got 140 basic special attack versus 129 for Pyroar. So the Mega Houndoom is far stronger, and the Solar Power boosts all of Houndoom's moves, including Sludge Bomb and Sucker Punch and Dark Pulse. So it's not just the fire moves that are getting boosted. Whereas Pyroar, in theory, according to this leak, would only have its fire moves boosted. Now let's talk about Houndoom's viability. It is unviable. It is not a good Mega. It only works on Sun teams, which I guess technically you could argue that a Mega Pyroar does not have to be run on a Sun team, because it does not rely on the Sun to get its ability if its ability were this fire boosting ability. But if you were to run optimally, then you would run it on a Sun team, probably alongside a Torkoal or Ninetales or whatever you happen to have in your tier. Usually in lower tiers, where Mega Pyroar will almost inevitably be, the Auto Sun is banned, Drought is banned, so you would have to run manual Sun, which would complicate things further. But Mega Houndoom is not viable in higher tiers, even where Sun is allowed, and the Mega Pyroar is going to fall into very much the same situation if it decides to go on this fire boosting route. What could they give it that would actually be meaningful? And the answer to that question is I have absolutely no idea what they could give it. Because nothing they could give Mega Pyroar, in my opinion, would be meaningfully significant enough to make it a good Pokemon. You could give it adaptability, that would basically be the same thing as solar power, but without the penalty, without needing the sun. Again, you probably want the sun if you are trying to boost your fire moves, but like whatever. At least adaptability would be something. But we already have to start reaching for the big guns, for the most broken abilities, in order to even salvage some modicum of utility out of this Pokemon. In the pet mod, they give Pyroar Drought, which it would not even be the first Mega Pokemon that would have Drought. It would be a faster Mega Pokemon that has Drought as opposed to Charizard. That may or may not be a good thing depending on how you are playing. For example, if you are trying to win a Weather War, it actually probably would be better for you to be slower, not faster. At least then you would underspeed the Ninetales or whatever. But maybe in certain instances it would be better for you to be faster. I don't know. You could use Drought, at least then you would be a Drought bot. And if Drought got banned from lower tiers, then technically Mega Pyroar would be in a high tier because it could not be used in lower tiers. But that would be a technicality, and nobody would really use it on a Sun team because you would not be able to use Heat Rock, and you would not be nearly as good as Mega Charizard Y. Mega Pyroar suffers from being not fast enough to be significantly fast, especially in a metagame riddled with Mega Pokemon that easily break 130 on a regular basis. It also suffers from being a fire type and not being able to run heavy duty boots. It also suffers from not even having 130 base special attack. And it has the base 129. So, it's not awful, but that's the only stat that we can write home about, really. Its defenses are mediocre. It has so many points put into attack that did not need to be there. And its dual stab is not meaningfully strong. Yes, Hyper Voice is nice into something like Primarina, I guess, as opposed to Mega Houndoom, which would not be able to use his dual stabs. But hey, Mega Houndoom has Sludge Bomb for Primarina, and it has Sucker Punch, right? And it's still bad. Now, Mega Pyroar gets to keep Earth Power. That's cool. As coverage, but it's not stab. Only stab option you got is Hyper Voice, which is just one of the worst moves. If you have to run Hyper Voice as a Pokemon, you know you've lost the sauce. If Mega Pyroar had Boom Burst, then we'd be talking. Then I'd be interested in it, because Boom Burst would actually elevate the ceiling for damage for Mega Pyroar to a new level. But if we're just talking about what can Mega Pyroar do to get damage, it doesn't have a Nasty Plot, it doesn't have Calm Mind, so you're stuck with Workup, if it's even in the game, which I don't remember if Workup is even in Champions. I think it's not, because Mega Pidgeot doesn't get it, right? So it has no ability to boost its stats, as opposed to something like, again, Mega Houndoom, which I think is its best comp. And you have Hyper Voice, which is a 90 base power, normal type move, which can never, ever, ever be super effective on anything. And can be resisted or being immune by a lot of things. And you have Fire, which is, fine, I guess. You get Solar Beam, so if you have Drought, you get that as coverage. That's cute. That's it. That's what you're working with. So, Mega Pyroar cannot boost its stats. It cannot get it stronger at all. So having an ability that would make it stronger would be good, but even if you do make it stronger, as we've seen with Mega Houndoom, I don't see how you could be good. Now, I do think that this Pokemon almost certainly will not get a good ability. A lot of these other Pokemon look like they had effort and thought put into them. Even something like Mega Raichu X may get a good ability just because Game Freak does want their, is Raichu. They're not going to mess up Raichu, surely. But Pyroar is a Pokemon that most people do not care about. It was on a character that I don't think that many people liked, and I think it was more of an afterthought than anything else. And unfortunately, I think this is one Pokemon that Game Freak won't be able to save. But that's my thoughts about this. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section, and I'll catch you guys next time.